Welcome to From Dentist to Novo. I'm your host, Jonathan Miller, and after almost 2 decades of helping dentists go into practice ownership by way of startup or acquisition, I'm here to share real strategies and not just motivation. So let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, by the way. I am stoked to have you on. I guess you have to say that. It would be weird if I was like, oh, I'm kind of okay about having you on, and we'll see how this goes. And I'm also jealous because I don't have a cool sign in the background, so I got to work on that. Is that an Etsy purchase, by the way?
It was a birthday gift from my fiance, so I think it was an Etsy purchase. I was actually very impressed by his ability to customize. So
yes, it's just one of those things. It's perspective.
Definitely.
Which, ironically enough, perspective is the thing about practice ownership. You know, it is. It's not for everyone. I will say that. I definitely talk to some doctors, and it kind of comes out, hey, you know what? Maybe practice ownership isn't the thing for you. Give me your feedback on, currently you're an associate doc, and you're not an owner today, and you may or may not be an owner in the future. That is yet to be determined. We're not breaking any news here. But give me, what do you hear your friends talk about? What do you hear people say to you? Is anyone like, oh, you're crazy to have a practice at all? Is anybody like, oh, you're dumb not to have a practice? Take it from there.
So I actually think that my generation of dentists, I think we're going to find that more of them are not going to want to do ownership, which I find to be a good thing and a bad thing. I think that if you're somebody who wants to be an owner, it's going to be an excellent thing for you because you're willing to take on the challenge that a lot of people, it's just so easy now to become an associate. There's just so much, it's just easier. You can go work corporate if you really want to tomorrow, and they would love to have you. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. If that's a means to an end and you're happy there, then so be it. But I know for me personally, I'm okay with breaking the news. Everybody knows in all factors of my life, but I am moving on with my career. And, we've been in Cincinnati for 4 years, and my fiance's been doing his oral surgery residency, and now we're moving on to move back to South Florida. So I definitely think that it's in the works for me. I've always bounced around the idea of ownership and doing, a startup versus an acquisition. So I think there's a lot of value there, but to your point, not everybody. I understand why people want to be associates. It's so much easier. It's so much easier. You're not thinking about it when you leave the office. You're not worried about feeding mouths. You're not worried about any of that stuff. And the practice I've been working at for the last 4 years, there's like 30 some of us, and to be the practice owner of that office and have to worry about feeding, making sure everybody gets the paychecks and that everyone's happy and all the things, it's a lot of work. So a lot I've learned for sure. But it's still something that I think that I could make my own, and that makes me really excited.
I agree with all of that wholeheartedly. And even as a guy that helps doctors go from what I would say, and as the podcast is titled, from dentist to de novo, but really from dentist to CEO, right? De novo to me is more of a mindset, is more of a mentality, is more of a, even when you buy a practice that's established or you've ran a practice for several years, you still have to approach every year with that mindset of like, hey, what would I do differently if I had to do it all over again? Or what would somebody do today that maybe wanted to totally take over my enterprise, if you will? And so I find that often, and it's fascinating to me. And one of the biggest reasons why I was like, oh, I want to have this chat with you is because of that generational component of it. And like, I do see a shift. I think it's part of the reason why de novos have grown, why DSOs have grown so much, is because, well, there's a big group of doctors going, I don't really want to do the ownership thing. I don't really have the mentality for it, or I don't want to say work ethic, but just the hassle. I don't want to put up with that much hassle.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I call it the BS to benefit ratio. And that is the BS that you're thinking. And sometimes it just ain't worth it, depending upon what you want to get out of it. And I find that a lot of times, if you're in this for, I want to make money, or I want to have multi-practice ownership for certain reasons, it's usually a bad idea. That's just because you're not thinking about the things the right way, as opposed to, I think if you really want work-life balance, own your own practice.
Yeah.
If you really want to have a say in like what your future career looks like and what people can and can't do, et cetera, own your own practice. And whether that's an acquisition or a startup, there's a bit of freedom and flexibility and security and like, hey, this is all here for you. You get to decide.
Yeah.
There is also freedom and flexibility in an associate position, but somebody can come to you tomorrow and go, oh, we sold, and new owners want to do this, and new owners want you to do that, and new owners say this, and you're going, oh, I have zero say. I might have had a great relationship with the old owner, and we were getting along swimmingly, and now new owner came in and said, yeah, guess what? We're working Saturdays now.
Right.
And guess what? We're working Sundays now. And guess what? You're working 7 to 7 now, and you're going, oh, boy. You have friends that have experienced that, or haven't experienced that? Is that correct? You've been on a pretty good path.
I've worked in a private practice pretty much the whole time. I've worked at 2 offices now. And I would say my experience has been good. I think that there's good and bad in any office that you work at. I think there's experiences that you get and you're like, okay, I maybe wouldn't have done it that way. I think the biggest component that I really, really just can't stand is like I know that money has everything to do with the business, but I think that when you do good dentistry, the money will come if you have good systems that are set up and you've done your research ahead of time. You've put in the work to make everything work the way it's supposed to. I have definitely had friends who have had like horrible experiences at their associateships. And I've certainly had my ups and downs, but I would say overall, I think the biggest thing I've gained from my associateship is, what do I want? What am I looking for in my career? What's fulfilling to me? What do I enjoy? Like something I've really recognized. You were talking about like having your own schedule and the freedom to do those things. I've been lucky because the office I've worked at generally has been pretty open to the fact that I like to do speaking engagements and things like that. But there's always this level of guilt every time I put in, I'm really taking vacation time every time I take off to do those things. Whereas for me, if I own my own office, I'm taking that time off. For me, it's not vacation time. I'm building on my practice and my values and my connection with people. And then the second part is, I've learned that I don't like chaotic offices. As I love my life to be chaotic. I was just joking earlier with my one of my family members. I'm like, I almost get sad, like depressed when I don't have big projects and like a little bit of stress going on. Whereas like in the office, I like to be honed in on what I'm doing. And I don't like the idea of running around to 12 different ops. Like I want my patient to know when I'm in the room with them, I'm laser focused in on them and that they're the only person and thing that I'm thinking about. I find that I function better that way. I mean, I can function at that higher level. I just don't enjoy it. And so like honing in on those little things that I would have never known about myself. I used to like brag about how big our office was. And now looking at it, it's amazing for what it is, but it's not what I would want. And that was huge. I never thought that I would think that way, that I always would want the hustle and bustle. But in practice, in the art of dentistry and working with ceramics and working with people and just human beings, like one-on-one time, I'm finding that I really value that more than anything.
Did you realize this recently or a long time ago?
I think I realized it actually probably about halfway through. I wouldn't even say it was early on. Early on, I was too busy trying to figure out. I mean, I was a new grad 4 years ago, right? So when I first started, it was just like chaos all over. And I was like, okay, this is eventually going to slow down. I'm eventually not going to have to look at my schedule like 8 weeks in advance to feel okay. And then as I slowly got into it, and I'm like, what is it? Like you have a couple of bad days and you ask yourself, like, what about that day was so bad to me? And every single time I could like recognize it was things weren't going my way because I felt rushed to leave one room to go to the next. And I really hated that. I hated the way it made me feel that I was making them feel in the room. Like they could hear the hygienist waiting for me. They could hear somebody saying, Dr. Tara, I'm ready for you in the other room. And I was like, we got to cut all of that. I don't want any of that anymore. I don't care. Just place a sticky note. I'll know that you're waiting for me, but I just have to be focused in on what they're saying. And I can't be thinking about how you're standing in the hallway waiting for me. And I know that's part of it, right? Like there's some level you have to be productive, but there has to be a level of respect between you and the patient. And I value that above everything else that I do. as well as with team members. Like I want them to know when they speak to me or when they're talking in the room that I value everything that they're saying, which I guess is like a whole other category of you got to really love the people that you hire or work with. The reason why I've stayed at this current position that I'm in is because the team is 10 out of 10. Like I don't know. I hope that one day I could build a practice that has such a wonderful team. But between those two, the values of like good team members and good patients, there's nothing that seems to top the fulfillment it gives me.
So super insightful, because I find that there's a lot of doctors, if we're being honest, don't come out of dental school knowing that stuff. And you shouldn't. Your head's spinning and student loan debt and this and that, and where am I going to get a job? And there's that stress of everything else going on. And so I think I almost encourage more doctors, or as much as I can, hey, spend some time in an associate position, because you don't really know what is good or bad until you're there. And then go, okay, this is what I want, or this is what I don't want. I think some of it also is like I find it like relationships, and that meaning like not necessarily friendships, but the relationships where you end up with that partner. And there's a point in which you've dated around, and we won't tell the fiance that you ever dated anyone else but him, of course not. But you did at some point say, okay, now I've got my list of things where I'm willing to live with and then never put up with this stuff again. I'm never going to put up with these things again. These are, as we say today, red flags. And so then you go, okay, here, if I see these things, I'm out, because it ain't worth my time. It's not worth my investment of just mental capacity to try and fix this thing or overlook this thing, because every time I overlooked it, it bit me in the butt. And so I think that you need some time I don't even want to call it paying your dues. I just want to call it like being out in the world, having that real world experience and saying, okay, now you know what you're willing to live with, and then also what you need to cut out. The stuff that you want to, say, no friggin' way am I dealing with that again.
Right.
I love that answer. I was ready to start clapping during some of that stuff, because I find it insightful and it comes from a genuine place. I think there's something too about owning your own practice. I'm a big believer in authenticity, and the whole reason why this podcast exists and why, hey, I found that there isn't anybody out there, or in my opinion, there wasn't enough focus on information over affirmation. You probably heard me say that a couple hundred times, but that is a part of the deal. I want to be about information over affirmation, and not try and come on here and tell you like, oh, you got to do a startup and you got to do it my way, or you got to buy a practice and I'm the only guy that knows how to do that, or any of that nonsense. I really try to connect with the doctor in your position and say, okay, what is it about this thing that you really want so badly, and why? And then through that process, we decide, okay, are you a better fit for a startup or an acquisition? Some doctors call me and go, I would never do a startup. I think that's crazy. I only want to buy. And I'll say, hey, that's cool. All good. We'll look at acquisitions. No problem. But I'll tell you, some of those folks end up doing the startup because the acquisition market just kind of stinks in certain places.
I never thought about doing a start. In fact, I was one of those people until you and I had a discussion like maybe 2 years ago at one of the retreats that we went to. And I remember being like, well, maybe you told me that I wasn't crazy for thinking about doing that in a really saturated area like South Florida. And I was like, okay, well, if the guy who does startups, who lives in a very saturated in California, is still managing to not only successfully allow dentists to do startups, but he's doing it over and over and over again, that tells me that, okay, there's like a recipe that is working. And so it is possible. And to your point, I mean, I've been looking for years. I had probably like one solid opportunity, but the timing just wasn't right for the acquisition. And even then, there was so much I would have changed about that practice that it's like at some point you got to stop and think, okay, is it worth it to just keep trying to fix something, or do we just start from scratch so that we can? So, I mean, I see the value in both now, whereas before I couldn't see the value in a startup.
Interesting. That's insightful too. There's probably a whole nother episode on how you got there, but there's something that clicks. There's something that clicks. At some point you're going, okay, I can see this. I can see that. I think sometimes folks get, and I'm thinking of a couple dentists right now that I'm working with, they get so focused on the outcome that they're not willing to see any other sides.
Yeah.
And I know that when we look in these, on the message boards or in the chat rooms or those kinds of things, a lot of people are in there trying to just tell you that like, oh, I'm right. My way is the right way. So if I did a startup, then you'd be crazy to buy a practice. And if I bought a practice, you're an idiot if you want to do a startup. And here's why, because I want you to think that I'm the smartest person in the room or that my way was the right way. And so then, then folks start to, again, go after affirmation over information and start to just think like, oh, well, I have to do it this one way. I can't be distracted by anything else. And more often than not, they're focused on the wrong thing. They're focused on just, I kind of equate it to like, a midlife crisis. If I went out and said, oh, well, I'm thinking right now, my wife would kill me, by the way. But if I came home with like a Porsche and said, oh, look at this, I bought a Porsche. I got a great deal. It was only 10 grand. She'd be like, why would you buy a $10,000 Porsche? What's the deal? Like, you still got to maintenance it, upkeep it, tires on it, blah, blah, blah. Probably pretty old, probably in bad shape. It's a $10,000 Porsche, but I could walk around the house and say, I drive a Porsche, or look at me, I have this Porsche. I was just so focused on getting that car that like, okay, I have it now. Big deal. And more often than not, it's usually a problem. So cool for you to recognize like, oh, the timing wasn't right, because there's a lot of folks that don't think that way. They think, oh, well, there is no perfect time. And then the other is to really look at it and go, hey, yeah, I would still have to make a lot of changes. I would still have to make a lot of sacrifices. And like, what's the point of buying this thing and still wanting to make all these changes?
Right. I agree. So what do you think in general? What is the limiting factor for people? What gets in the way?
So to pick on you all as dentists for a second, I think that you're so convinced in dealing with certainty and science and data and all those things that you've got to at some point take a leap of faith. And so I would say it's fear of the unknown, or some version of just not knowing the process and knowing the right steps to the process, that you just don't do it. And then that usually leads us into some version of, analysis paralysis. And like, I'm going to try and look for all the angles and look for all the science and the data and stuff. And at some point you just kind of have to have a, F it mentality and do it. At least take the one next step. I don't want you to do anything detrimental. But you will have to take the next step of some sort. And if I had to give you pragmatic or practical advice, there is a version where a lot of times people, when they're looking at doing any version of startup, acquisition, whatever, I don't care if we just talked about like how to go in and get in great shape. I'm not saying that I'm some peak physical fitness person. I'm saying that like, if you want to take on a new task of any kind, it's usually not about finding a way to add it to your plate. It's finding a way to cut something else out.
Right.
You're going to have to cut out, poker night with your buddies, or some you might have to cut out date nights with your spouse, because you got to commit some nights to getting stuff done. Sure. And so it's usually some version of, what are you going to cut out in order to get the thing? Sacrifice. What are you going to do to get that thing then? I think you do the same thing when you were thinking about dental school. And like, I'm sure there's a lot of dentists that didn't get into their top choice, maybe only got into one option and said, well, I didn't even really want to go here at all, but I guess it is dental school over not. When I graduate, I still have DDS or DMD at the end of my name. So this could be a means to an end for me and maybe my springboard. But that was a version where you just said, okay, cool, this is what I have to do. There, you had to take a leap of faith. You had to go, okay, well, this may not have been my first choice, second choice, third choice, but I did get in.
Right.
And in the end, I'll still get to do the thing I want. I find that working in corporate dentistry can be some of that same thing. I think that, again, we talked about getting out and being an associate for a while to kind of learn just what you want and absolutely what you don't want. And I find that a lot of times doctors want to shy away from working in a corporate shop because of maybe some negative connotation or what have you. But most of the time, those folks are pretty chill about, you want to go part-time and work a startup? Great. Be my guest. We're not going to upset the apple cart of Aspen Dental or Heartland Dental or anything like that. They're not, your one office isn't going to upend their enterprise and be some Uber to taxi cab industry thing. They're not worried about that at all. And they don't take it personally either. Like when you work in a private practice, there's a lot of doctors that you might be the first associate they ever hired. And now they're really frustrated. And I've had, unfortunately, we're not doing ourselves any favors in the male version of the industry, where I've had male owners, really talk down to female dentists that I've helped to want to leave. And that really accelerates their wanting to leave. They're like, oh, that's how you really feel? Great. Then I will exit this thing a hell of a lot faster than you thought I was going to. I was actually going to be chill and work with you and maybe work part-time and really help train the next associate. And those female docs are like, hey, deuces, I'm out. I'm going to open this thing up even faster and get going even faster. And so I just think that to fear the unknown, not knowing what next step to take, will have everybody press pause, and then they'll go into that analysis paralysis mode. And I don't blame you. But I think that comes also by way of how you're trained. You're trained to look in millimeter pockets all day long and find the things that are, that need fixed. And there's a lot of science and data behind how you are trained. And in business, there's some of this that there is a part of it that's go with your gut. And to your story about the reason why you didn't buy that one opportunity that you said actually was pretty solid, there was some gut component of that was like, hey, it's just not the right thing. and not the right time or not the right practice, whatever it could have been. It just wasn't the right thing. And something in your gut told you, because in some cases we probably could rationalize, well, it is this and it is this. And you kind of, have you ever ignored that gut feeling and you gotten burned?
Oh, totally. And I loved what you said about that, because I think what it is, I've like broken it down into a science about why I initially couldn't get my mind into the why won't you take a risk on yourself? And it really is because I think dentists in general, the way we think is, and I would say I think majority of dentists know they want to be a dentist. I think very few of them will go to college not knowing that they want to be, a dentist at that point. So I feel like what happens is we're like, I'm going to go to high school. I'm going to get good grades. Then that's going to help me get into a good college, which is then going to help me get into a good or a good dental school. And it's like there's these blocks of processes that we know that if we execute it right, that we're going to get to that next step. But then when it gets to, it's a calculated equation, at some point you're going to get in if you do the right things that appropriately fit the prototype, student. Once you get out, it's like, I've dreamed my whole life that I was going to be a dentist. And now I'm a dentist and I've never thought past once I get the DMD. What does that look like for me? And so for me, and I've talked to so many people about this, and I think some people were like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And some people are like, wow, I didn't know that that's what it was. But it totally, I found that people really relate to that. And we've just been so calculated, right? I know I'm going to have to do this, and this, versus like there is no perfect formula for the perfect practice, because there's different people for different providers. And I work in a practice with 5 doctors, and not every patient likes to work with every single one of us. Yes, we have similar, practice types. We have similar treatment values, but I would say ultimately we're different people. The patients that meshed really well with me might not mesh with my coworker that I'm really good friends with, that I would totally go have dinner with, that I do have dinner with. But it's like, you got to be okay. And I'm not even in it, but it's what I keep telling myself, that if I just keep betting on myself and understand that at the end of the day, there's going to be somebody out there who wants to see me as their dentist, as they have as an associate, then I'm going to be okay. I just have to, back to what you say, is authentically be myself, never change that. I find that the dentists that aren't doing well are the ones who tried to be somebody that they're not, and now they're being found out. And so I hope that is the magic formula for it. But I do think that's why a lot of dentists are bad at it, because we're just not, one, we're not taught the business side. And 2, when it comes to that point, we're like, well, I've only bet on myself in things that were in my control, like my grades, my ability to study, my, when you take a loan out, how much you're taking out. And now the next step, it's like, I can only do what I can do. And if I hire the right people and whatever, well, hopefully it all comes together, but it's a gamble.
So what scares you most about that ownership component?
I think that there's always a fear of failing, right? And I do think some of the best outcomes in my life have happened because I took that leap of faith and I failed. And then the next thing that happened was wonderful. I think it's what doesn't allow me to sleep at night with the thought of it is that there's going to be people relying on me to make sure that their family's mouths are fed. And like I said earlier, I know that a lot of dentists care a lot about how much money they make. And I have seen that be a really great thing, and I've seen it be a really bad thing. So for me, I know that as a dentist, it's part of why I chose the career. I'm going to be financially successful. What I want to make sure is that my team members are valued, and that stress doesn't put me in a bad situation where, like I don't want to nickel and dime people. Like I hate that feeling. But at the same time, I have to make sure that my office is making enough money to make sure my people are taken care of, because they come first. That's probably the scariest part for me is okay, well, it won't just be about me anymore. If I take time off of work, I have to make sure my people are taken care of.
Relying on you.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the most respectful thing you can do. And you're going to get burned regardless. Like if you're really good to people or really bad to people. But I'd rather be known as somebody who had good core values and wanted to execute those as best as she could than the person who was just like not a good person and thought they could get away with it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm being naive, right? Like you don't know because then you meet people and you're like, wow, they're a savage and that's probably why they're so successful. But then I've met like some of my favorite people are real, authentic, genuine people who were good business people, but they did it without cheating people. And
Yeah.
I really respect that kind of person because I think they exist. And just because you have to make a savvy decision doesn't mean that you're being a savage person. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Totally. I think you can be both.
Yeah.
And I think that part of owning your own practice is wearing multiple hats. And at some point, you're going to try and tell these folks that you care about them and you love having them on the team. But when they're not performing, you're going to have to say, hey, now you're detrimental to the rest of the crew.
Right.
And so when people come first, I have to make the tough decisions about those people that aren't going to make it and aren't going to last. And at that point, you will find people that go, oh, well, you are not good. It's my 6-year-old when I have to enforce the rules. Dad, this is the worst. You're the worst, whatever. But we have to get to bed. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It is bedtime and we are going to bed right now. And so you're going to find that very similar approach and everybody finds their groove. But if you're focused on being real and being genuine, the cool thing about that is in the beginning, you'll attract the right kind of people from day one. It doesn't mean that those right kind of people won't make mistakes, slip and fall, and or turn into something else. And then at some point you have to make decisions for the good of the team. Because that will happen too. I will say people will surprise you, both good and bad. Some folks you'll think can't hack it, may step up to the plate, and other folks you think are rock stars, may end up taking advantage of you.
Sure.
And so that's something it's not meant to be cynical. It's meant to not be surprised. Like, oh, well, this can happen. Whichever version. They can step up and surprise me pleasantly, or they can, oh, wow, they're trying to take advantage of me because I was nice or because I was generous or whatever that is.
Do you ever work with clients that you feel like are, I think a little bit of delusion is good. But do you ever feel like you're like, okay, you're really delusional. Your goals are maybe too, and you never want to tell anyone like their dreams are like not are too much, but do you find that you have that someone who's really chaotic about what they want to do and you're like, that's just not going to work? So how do you manage that?
So I do work with folks that have big aspirations. I try to dissect a little bit of like, hey, well, why is that the thing? And what's the outcome you're really after? And then when I do that, I can decide, because if it's too crazy, I just say, hey, like, thanks for giving me an opportunity to help you with this project, but it's not going to be something I can help you with. And that sometimes happens. When those people come to me that have ambitions of multi-practice ownership and a short timeline and all those things, it's kind of like, well, let's just get one practice first. And I can't help but equate it to similarities of being a parent, and that like have one and then let me know how you feel about 2 and 3 and 4. And sometimes, it's funny because I have some friends that are not interested in having kids and like, well, I got pets. I'm like, it's not. I can put my dog in a room and say, hey, be quiet and here's some water and some food and walk away and everything will be fine. I cannot do that to my child, even though I might want to sometimes. And so, I think that those people that it's the same kind of concept. Like, oh, well, I have pets so I can have multiple kids. Not really true. Have one and let's see how you are. Let's have one practice. Let's get that off the ground and let's see how it goes. For better or worse, most of the time it's a male dentist calling me up saying, I'm going to have 5 practices in 5 years and I need your help to do it. And I'm like, let's just get one down and let's see how that process works and let's go. I will tell you on the flip side, I get some folks that call me and say, well, I worked at a corporate shop, insert corporate dental office USA, and I've done plenty of startups. Like I've actually helped a couple of doctors that had multi-locations with a couple of them, and they were the owner of those multi-locations, but they actually never, when you break it down and when I ask them questions, they never really did the opening up of it. They just showed up. When the office doors were open, they walked in. And then, of course, they did run a team and they did do the dentistry and they did have to do all that business stuff. But also there was a big fat safety net of comfort and security. And like, it's not technically all on them. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, there's a regional manager person that comes in and talks culture and optimizes team and those kinds of things. And yes, that doctor is still the one that has to toe the line and still has to be the one there every single day. So I don't want to take anything away from them. But when we start talking about the startup process, the ones that aren't delusional are the ones like, I see. There's a lot of stuff here I don't know. And so it would be like babysitting your nieces and nephews and then be like, oh, this is going to be a mom. No problem. This is easy. And the mom would be like, you have no idea. Babysitting for a couple hours ain't the same thing. And so the other ones that come to the table and they're like, oh, well, I've ran 4 or 5 offices for such and such corporate shop and those were all startups. It's not the same. I don't know how to tell you. It's just not the same. And so I would say, those are the delusions that I see. And balancing it is really just asking them better questions and trying to uncover kind of, well, why are they, if they may just be delusional in the moment. They may just have a, kind of like, I just didn't know any better, and that's okay. And if it comes down to like, oh, I'm hearing what you're saying and now I do know better and now I still want to do it anyway. It's like, well, look, I don't know if I can help you. If my son's going to go touch the hot stove after I told him it's hot and after he's already burned himself once and he keeps wanting to do it, we got bigger problems. We got to figure this out.
So let's be honest real quick. So there is a big component of ego in dentistry. And I find that the more dentists I meet, there's different levels of ego. I think a little ego is great. I actually think it gives you that level of confidence that you need. But sometimes people get really carried away. How do you think that most people respond? So you were just saying like, I'm the doctor who, let's open up 5. And you're like, well, let's start with 1. Do you feel that people are responsive to that? Or like, are they willing to give up the reins? Because most dentists I know are they're control freaks. I would be lying if I said I didn't like to control things. So are people accepting of you don't know what you don't know?
The ones that I work with, yeah. The ones I don't work with are probably no. And that's just because I'm also like, look, I don't want to be in a position to say, well, I told you so. And I don't want to be in a position to say, well, I'm right and you're wrong. I want to work together and collaborate and focus on us being right together. I also know that if we go down the path that you're saying you keep want to go down, we're going to end up in disaster. So fine. Like there are some doctors now, no surprise really, that are on social media that are advertising and proclaiming to be these experts. And they've only done it one time. And that's cool. I applaud your success. I think this is great news. I am an advocate for the private practice owner. I think that if there aren't advocates for private practice, DSOs will take over and there'll be a handful of you guys left. And it'll be like, oh, well, that's cool. But we all just go here now. We all just buy our stuff off Amazon now. Like I can go shop at a little boutique if I want to, but Amazon gets most of my business. And so
right.
I think that the truth is in, as we started out saying, you've got to be genuine. You've got to be prepared to appreciate the process. And I was saying about the social media component because there are doctors out there proclaiming to be super successful, and then behind closed doors, or like I talk to a lot of banks because I have that career in banking before this, right? And they'll tell me, yeah, Dr. So-and-so, we're not lending them any more money. Can't possibly. Like, so, and I'm like, oh, interesting, because they're doing a retreat about blah, 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 successful practice ownership. And you're like, okay, cool. And I'm not saying that they don't have some wisdoms of success or some nuggets of success in there. I think success leaves clues, and that's cool. But I'm also like, it's not genuine either.
And I think that's exactly what we were talking about earlier. Like, you will be found out, right? And it sucks because nobody wants you to fail, really. I mean, at least people who, it's like the saying that anyone who's ahead of you is never going to look down on you. Right. They have their own, they're too busy with their own successes. But it is very sad when people pretend to be something that they're not. And then you look at what their careers have led to, and it almost makes me like, man, you didn't have to take that step. Is there a step that you find that you've seen people make that mistake, dentists make over and over as owners, specifically even with like when they first start, or something that they continue to do and you're like, why do you guys keep doing this, and you just want to shake us?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. But if we have to narrow it down to just a handful, I would say you have to vet out the people that you're working with, and you do have to trust them. So I do find that sometimes you can be, as the saying goes, penny wise, pound foolish. And today we say you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. So I do find that you can go through this process and try and put people on your team and then not follow their advice, not trust them. So you have a CPA that says this, you have an attorney that says this, and you go, not the hell I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, but if you vetted that person out and you do trust that person. Now on the flip side, I find that there are some doctors that just go, oh, well, this is my number one complaint about the whole industry. And that is you guys will go to other dentists, again, that have only done it once before and say, well, they know. Maybe they did it one time before. That's cool. But I came up with an analogy. I'm like, imagine if you were in dental school, you walked past your buddy in the hall. They were coming out of clinic. You're going into clinic, and they were like, Tara, you're not going to believe this. I just delivered the most perfect crown on the planet. And, old Professor so-and-so said, I'm teaching the course now on crowns. That's crazy, right? And you're going to go, yeah, because we were out all night last night. So I'm kind of thinking there's some luck here or something, bud, because I don't think you did that. No. They said, I'm teaching the class. And you would go, I'm not listening to you, dude. There's no way. You got lucky, bro. But you guys aren't having those conversations. You're just, it's a message board, or it's a Facebook, or it's a podcast, full disclosure. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, they said I have to take insurances, or don't take insurances, or no one goes through the process of like, let me find the people that actually believe the thing that I believe and are going to tell me what I need to know, even if it's not what I want to hear. And then let me actually listen to that version of it. Because sometimes that's a bitter pill to swallow.
Are there sacrifices that you see people often don't want to give up? Like, is it mostly the competition thing? Like they're worried about competition, and do you find that people are still successful even though that was like a fear for them? So for me, for example, I mean, that is a real fear for me. I grew up in South Florida. South Florida is home to me, but I also know it's paradise for a lot of other people. And so that is the first thing that went to my head when I was like, am I crazy? So do you find that that's an issue?
Yeah, I would tell you that it is. It's more about not understanding how to listen to what the market's telling you. And I think that's just a business thing, right? And so if you said, I'm going to set up shop in South Florida and I'm going to be this, in whatever dental version that you believe you want to do, and let's pretend the market's like, that's lame, dude. Like, I don't care. I don't care that you offer Botox or whatever. Doesn't matter to me. Then you better pivot. You can't you can't try and force feed them. The market is the ultimate sayer, right? The people around your practice, if you will, are the ones that are going to say either I'm coming to see you because I believe in the way you do dentistry, or I'm not coming to see you because I don't believe in the way you do dentistry. And so like, you've got your holistic dental folks out there. You've got your detractors from that as well. But like, there's some people that are like, yeah, I will drive to go see a holistic dentist and whatever that means to them. And like, okay, great. And then you've got, I'm sure half the dental community is like, oh, it's all nonsense. I had somebody the other day tell me that's malpractice, that holistic dentistry stuff. I'm like, all right, well, but the market will say. And so most doctors aren't willing to listen to that. They just think it's noise. They just, and some of them, unfortunately don't know how to get that feedback or tap into that feedback.
I was going to say, I think that's probably the problem, is they don't even know, well, where do I get that? Where do I even get that kind of information that's actually valuable, and not their bro from dental school who placed one good crown?
Yeah. So in the early days, before you open your practice, there are people you got to put on your team, right? And I think a lot of times we think there are people out to get us. We think the equipment person's out to sell us a bunch of equipment, and that is everything that we will ever talk about, whether it's today or on this podcast. For anybody listening, there are good and bad players in any industry. There are good and bad consultants. I've got friends that hate going to the dentist because they were told they need to replace every tooth in their mouth, and the other dentist said, no, you don't, dude. Yeah, you need a couple fillings, but you don't. And so all of a sudden, like, see, all dentists are swindlers. That one guy told me I got to take every tooth out, and I'm like, well, it's all good. You found the other dentist that said it wasn't the case. And so, yeah, there are some bad actors out there for every industry.
Sure.
But you do have to find your team. You have to find your tribe. You have to find those folks that you're willing to listen to and that you believe have your best interest at heart. And then you also have to be willing to say, hey, enough's enough. If you're not getting the results you want, you need to be able to know that. I mean, most of my job is being the advocate for the doctor. It is not necessarily telling them, okay, well, when I say jump, you say how high, or any of that nonsense. It's more of a collaborative effort, but it's also letting the doctor know, hey, based on the feedback we're getting from contractor, equipment person, bank, whatever, either doc, sometimes they need to make decisions right now. Like, hey, doc, you're the one slowing the project down. You haven't decided this and this and this, and you got to get going. And like, well, I'm just busy and that. And I'm like, well, I can give you all the resources possible, but you will have to actually, fill some paperwork out or click some buttons and apply online and do some things. And then along with that, knowing, hey, doc, there's some people on the team that aren't pulling their weight. Contractor so-and-so is not getting this done, so we're going to have a tough conversation. Equipment person is actually trying to oversell you a bunch of stuff, and so we're going to have a tough conversation. But when you find those folks, build those relationships and hang on to them. That's in the early days, right? Then when you get the doors open, you've got your practice team. So you've got to hire the right people. I would encourage you to spend a little bit more money than maybe comfort zone level or maybe the cash flow metrics say, because I can only do so much projection and so much cash flow analysis and all that stuff that eventually it matters about what you really do. You know, what really happens. And more often than not, when you potentially overpay for team members, it usually works out to your benefit. When you underpay, I promise you, it rarely ever works out. It's like a unicorn. It's a once in a blue moon lottery ticket style thing. And you underpay for team and they actually deliver for you. And so when you get that team involved, now you use that team, your practice team, to say, okay, guys, how are we delivering? Are the patients happy? Are they stoked? Are we getting negative feedback? And let's collaborate together, because when they buy into the practice, to the vision that you have, to the processes that you've set up that we sometimes call systems, they will go to bat for you. They will say, yep, I'm a part of this thing. I helped create this thing. And so I will work this thing until the wheels fall off. And then from there, you listen to your patients. As you gather enough patient base, you start to listen to them. Why do you like coming to see us? What keeps you coming back? Is there anything we could change or do to keep you for life? And is there anything that we could do that you would say, oh my God, you did this, now I'm no longer coming back? Right? If you ask those questions to just a handful of patients, you're going to find yourself in that, that 80-20 rule. You've heard that before, right? So when you just find a small segment of your patient base to answer the questions, that's basically how the rest of your patient base feels. And so when you figure that out and they say, yeah, if you, if you take away Stacy at the front, I'll never come back. You're like, oh crap, Stacy is really valuable. Now, I don't want Stacy to hold you over the coals for that for the rest of your days, but you would realize that, oh, hey, so-and-so at the front is amazing and valuable. Maybe what are they doing that's so great? Because on the other hand, they might say, yeah, the dental assistants aren't awesome. They're kind of rude or whatever. Oh, okay. So for whatever reason, people have their reasons. But listening to that feedback from the small segment of patient base, and that requires asking. Recording the conversation, if you will, not in a podcast format, of course, but like, what did they say? They said they love Stacy, they love the office design, and they love it when we offer them a bottle of water. And they hate it when we run late, and they hate it when we don't know their insurance, and they hate it when the hygienist keeps coming in and interrupting the doc and saying, oh, we're ready for you in room 2, right? And so now you have that feedback and you go, okay, great. Very simple. We're going to do more of the things they love and a heck of a lot less of the things they don't love. And we're going to minimize that negative impact. So another mistake that doctors don't pick up on is its experience. That is 50% of the marketing equation that most folks aren't listening to. They think it's all about advertising, but then you have to deliver an experience when they walk in the door. And so everybody walks in, or rather walks out as a dentist and says, I'm going to deliver a different level of dentistry. And you're like, okay, but does the patient really see it as different? Or they're like, it's kind of like going, it's kind of the same, dude. Like a front desk person, a dental chair or whatever. Right? And like, that's the hardest thing I think for them to listen to and even understand, is that I better walk my talk with my team, and then I better deliver a different experience if I say I'm going to deliver a different experience. If I'm saying we've raised the game or experience a new way of dentistry in South Florida as your tagline, I'm inserting generic stuff, Doc. I'm sure you're not going to say that. But then you better damn deliver, because when you don't, patients will tell you.
Oh, totally. And I think the part where people fail the most is they start it and then they never consistently, if you're going to be different, consistently be different. If you say you're going to do an iTero scan on every single new patient, do an iTero scan on every single new patient. It's hard to do, right? Like when you're in it and you've got all these things piling up on you, that day is slammed, there's an emergency you weren't expecting. You're like, you know what? Let's save 15 minutes and not do what we normally do. I find that, so like in the office I work in, we have one of the major corporations based out of Cincinnati. Pretty much they all come see us, and they all will consistently say, my colleague told me about your office and they said I had to come check you out, right? That's consistently. And I'm like, well, if all of these people are talking to each other, then they all know when they had a different experience. So like if one of them comes in and I did a full scan and we sat down and we took photos and we had a really good conversation and whatever, then they move on and they go rave to like 12 of their colleagues. Then the next person who comes back, all I do is take x-rays because they just have perfect teeth. it's almost like I've cheated them of the experience that brought them there.
Yes.
And then they're going to go back and be like, Jim, you told me that you had this awesome experience, and like mine wasn't not awesome, but it wasn't special. And then you look stupid because you're like, I didn't consistently value my new patient and show them, or even like their first appointment is amazing and you've like love bombed them into thinking that they're like the most special person in the world. And then they come back and it's like, all right, hi, Gene, you're in, you're out. It's great meeting you. So glad you came to our practice. See you later. It's like there has to be, and that's in everything in life. Like I think about like even how that applies to me in social media, how that like consistency is everything. Working out, eating right, relationships, your marriage. Like it's all about being consistent, showing up and doing what you say you're going to do. And it is hard. It is so hard. And I think that's like almost goes back to what you were saying before. You have to give something up to show up in the places where you need to show up. Like if giving that new patient experience is going to be identical every single time, then you have to say, we will not take emergencies during new patient exams or whatever the case is, right? Whatever you need to move around to make that puzzle piece fit. I think that is you hit like a really important thing that I think a lot of dentists are failing at is being consistent. Like stick to your core values, stick to what you say you're going to do, stick to your slogan. Like if you're different, how are you different? And are you consistently being different? That really hit different. That really struck a chord in me.
Yeah, I could tell. Consistency requires discipline.
Every time I talk to you, I am so engaged with what you have to say because you have such valuable little, it's like one of those things where if you have a notepad that you keep, which I definitely have, of like little star things that you're like, ooh, I need to remember that for that day. Right. When everything you've ever said to me, I really mean it, has always been, I would have never considered a startup had I not met you. And
no kidding.
I'm serious. I really mean that. And I think that this podcast is just another way for you to connect with people. And I'm so excited it's you. If you are who you are on camera, off camera, in person, at a social event. So I think the industry is very lucky to have you.
Wow. That's great. Thank you so much.
No,
Thanks for joining us on From Dentist to De Novo. Be sure to subscribe to learn more about what it takes to own your first practice. And until next time, I'm Jonathan Miller, helping preserve private practice dentistry, one doctor at a time.